you? Welcome to LSB Feasters Radio Channel and Travel Corner. Or maybe I should start the video the way the typical 12-year-old girl starts it. Hi, guys! Why do they all do that? I don't understand. Anyway, glad you're here. Today I got a great piece of audio for you from 98.7 KISS in New York. It's from August 2000, and it's the Frankie Crocker tribute. Frankie Crocker, legendary New York radio personality, started at WWRL in the mid-1960s, moved over to WMCA in the late 60s playing top 40, and then in the early 70s he moved over to inner city broadcasting, where he worked at WLIB AM and FM and was put in charge of a brand new project, a new radio station on FM, which was WLIB, which then became WBLS. Pretend like that just came out of one speaker at a time. WBLS was what was called urban contemporary. It was like a modern R&B. A lot of the AM R&Bs were very cluttered, a lot of talk, just a lot of stuff. Frankie Crocker took the R&B format, made it very smooth, very music intensive, made it kind of upmarket, and also added a lot of elements to it. In addition to the R&B, the jazz, even beat poetry, just as he called it, the total black experience in sound, which WBLS actually stood for, the world's best looking sound. Anyway, Frankie was there 3 times at WBLS, 1972, came back in 1979, came back again in 1990, and at the end of his radio career in New York, he was at WRKS 98.7 KISS. Frankie passed on in 2000, and I thought it was so cool that WRKS 98.7 KISS did this tribute to him, remembering the man and his everything he did in New York radio. And it's an interesting listen. This is the third part of a 3-part thing. I'll put links to the first 2 parts down below. You can go ahead and listen to it if you like. If you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe too. There's a little button right down there. You can go ahead and hit that and subscribe. Next to that subscribe button, there's a little bell. Just smack that thing and you'll get alerts every time we put up a brand new air check. So if you are ready, it's the Frankie Crocker tribute from WRKS 98.7 KISS from 2000.
80s, Frankie Crocker is back on the air and programming WBLS, but it's a different radio station, and times are different too. The Z100 Morning Zoo is now the new ratings king, so Frankie has to create a new image. Here's KISS FM's Fred Buggs.
Frankie came back. We worked together again in 89, 90. When he came back to New York, we worked together for a while there for about a year.
Right.
And then I left.
What was that experience like compared
that
to
that was good because this time, I mean, everybody's talking about how Frankie made the transition. And at that time, he was starting to talk a lot about the Bible, and he was starting to talk about his spirituality. He hadn't really gotten into it 100%, but he was going in that direction. I mean, it was definitely a difference. Frankie, he had been out for a couple of years. I think he'd done some station in Chicago. He was in there for a couple of months. And now he was back in New York where he wanted to be. And he started the thing in the evening called the Evening Bath at 6:30. And he would call it the Evening Bath, where he would play a lot of soothing music, some fusion cuts, some blues, something that hadn't been heard on the radio in New York for a while. And he called it the bath. A lot of people thought he was crazy for doing it, but a lot of people really enjoyed the bath.
Take a bath with Frankie. Also on hand to witness those times, KISS FM's own Shayla.
He started his show, every show, with a gospel song. It had to be a gospel song, followed by Flamingo, which was done by Jimmy Smith. And that's where you did your opening remarks. And then, as I said, everything went which way but loose. And loose, I should say. And everything came together at 8 o'clock. I mean, you had your power songs, hot songs, recurrents, reggae, rap, Latin, blues, all in 1 hour. You were entertained by at least one rap, reggae, or Latin song. Then there were exclusives that we played, and you could not say who was the artist because that's the way he kept it exclusive.
Mm-hmm. Give us an example of one of the exclusives.
One of the exclusives was Lisa Stansfield's Been Around the World. When he played it, we never said who did it. It was an import. What You Gonna Do With My Lovin' was remixed. That was an import. And, of course, we all knew who did it, but we didn't know who did the remix. We didn't say who did the remix.
Well, let's stay on all around the world, because we're going to concentrate on that.
Been around,
song.
okay.
But tell us about that song, because, yeah, there again, that became a huge record. I know it started off here in New York. I never knew whether Kiss played it first or BLS, but you're telling me Frankie got the import.
Frankie brought that song to New York. I remember the first day he played it, and he talked about it for about 10 minutes before he actually laid it down to let everybody know that he was the first to play it. And there he would talk about how people were scrambling trying to find out where this song came from, and he refused to say who it was on the air until I think, I don't know, maybe it was released in America. Well, yeah, in anywhere near New York, and then we found out who the artist was, and then we could mention it. Once it was played on another radio station, then it became common knowledge. So then that's when we were able to say. He would take a song from the door. Somebody brought it to the door, and if he liked it, it went straight to the turntable, and it was played. That was Frankie. He went with what moved him. And he had an incredible knack for knowing that it would move others as well. A great many, because there are songs that we play that just move you, or, and several other people. Never are hits, but it seemed like every song he said was going to be a hit was a mega hit.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about his favorite artists. Did he have favorites? Like he liked Stevie a lot, or one person that he would play in particular?
There was, as far as recurrence in oldies, Stevie was a favorite. Earth, Wind, and Fire. He would say, anything you go with Earth, Wind, and Fire, you can't lose. Then there was one song that he absolutely, positively loved. He always said it moved him like Death in the Family, and that was Babyface's Whip Appeal. Every time he played that song, and I was instructed that every time I play it, I should play the ending again. Say whatever you're going to say, and then throw it on again. So I had to be very creative and come up, because Lord knows I couldn't get on there and say, this one moves me like Death in the Family. That was his line. There were certain lines I can borrow, but that one was his. So I'd have to come in, and thanks to his engineer, Jim Weiner, who was excellent. He was just as much a perfectionist as Frankie was in putting that show together and keeping it, running it like a tight ship. There was no, if you heard Dead Air on Frankie's show, you know that somebody done passed out or dropped dead, because he ran a tight ship. But Babyface's Whip Appeal, I remember one time he called me from London, and he said, did you play Babyface yet? Now, he's in London. And I said, why? You want to make a request? And he said, he just laughed. I'd never heard Frankie laughed for so long, and then he said to me, you know what, I think I better hurry up and come back to New York before I don't have no show. Put on Babyface Whip Appeal and put me on hold, and put him on hold, and he listened to Babyface's Whip Appeal. That's just how much.
1990, 98.7 KISS FM had become the new ratings monster on radio. And once again, Frankie Crocker said goodbye, only to return in 1996 for one last attempt at bringing back the magic. After a brief run, Frankie was done. Despite success on television with VH1 and the NBC Friday night videos, the radio business had changed, and Frankie had to change with it. But those who were there at the beginning remember very well. They talk about Frankie, his work, and his accomplishments. Here's Shayla.
To me, there are no words that describe Frankie, but Frankie. 360 degrees of radio excellence. That's what Frankie Crocker is and has been to me and a whole lot of people, because had it not been for Frankie opening so many doors and creating so many things in black radio, I don't think maybe it wouldn't have spanned 30 years. I mean, he had 30 years to encourage and inspire. That's 3 decades. And still excel based on a gut feeling.
Here's Vi Higginson.
I think Frankie's major contribution to black radio was to reflect on radio what was outside in the community. For example, the lineup included a family man, Ken Webb, a woman who was conscious and involved in issues, a love man, a woman in the afternoon, a quiet evening, and a sort of quiet storm kind of thing. The appeal of a growing and changing community was reflected on the radio. And he must be credited for putting women on the air, because it changed the course of radio history. There's not a radio station worth its salt in this entire country that does not now have a woman on the air. And he did that. And so I think he needs to be credited with that. Also, he brought the power of the mass part of our generation. And you got to think that it was really the baby boomers who, in the 70s, who were being addressed, who we grew up on the Motown sound, and we grew up on Grover Washington, we grew up on Manu Dibango. These songs and this sound was kind of like a New York sound, which went all over the country. BLS became the prototype for successful radio. Also, because it was successful, it opened the door for black radio ownership. He needs to have credited for that. When anything black is successful, it makes it easier for other things to become successful. So those are the very three things that I would contribute to Frankie Crocker. Putting women on the air, for which I'm very grateful. 2, being reflective of a total black experience in music and a total black lifestyle experience, and opening the doors for successful black radio ownership.
Ken Webb remembers.
It was a period of time we were, all of us, including Frankie. Frankie was young at this because of the thing he was trying to do. When Inner City picked up the option to buy the station, the chairman made it clear that Frankie was not to be bothered because he had LIB and all the people there, and now they acquired WBLS. And rather than have everybody from LIB just jump on the little station, the word was inside was to leave Frankie alone. And Frankie was free, he had the freedom to do what he wanted, and it was a good thing because he developed something that he always wanted to do. And it was a time of hard work for everyone. I guess Frankie had already done his hard work. He was in a cruise creative mode, you know, with no one around you. You can really create. I think that's what he was doing. For me, it was a very, very hard time for me because I worked mornings and I taught out at Brooklyn College and I had children. You're trying to fulfill the needs of the family. But nonetheless, it was fun learning the new music, being able to see how the record companies would adjust their packaging and the music that came out. As far as the format that Frankie created and put together, I really loved every minute of it because I often had said that I never met anybody who I was able to agree with 99% of the music that he played and the way to do it. I think that if I was going to do something, I'd do it the same way Frankie. I mean, let's cut away his flamboyancy and look at the music and the format and the execution and so forth. I think it would have been done the same way.
Frankie Crocker, a visionary, a man with an ego who had a vision and brought a group of people along with him, and we all became part of that legacy. And he was a complicated, complex individual.
The voice of G. Keith Alexander. And here's Imhotep Gary Bird.
Frankie had a vision of himself as an entity. And I think that to a great extent, we have seen personalities in radio, general market radio, who have come with a similar mentality. Scott Shannon, Don Imus, and so forth. People who see themselves as entities in the industry. And I think Frankie early on claimed entityship for himself, that he placed a value on Frankie Crocker. And people might not like him who had to deal with him or maybe even work for him. But no one was ever under any doubt of how much value he placed on being Frankie Crocker and on assessing his market value. And I think that to a great extent what we see happening over the course and the history of WBLS and his time with FM is a struggle between a true assessment of what his value was. In the same sense that we see Michael Jordan in his last several years and an agonizing process over what to pay him. What do you pay him when he's actually doing something that's bigger than the team that he's on? Mm-hmm. And what your point about his effect on FM and what he did in terms of bringing people into this particular experience at WLIB FM and subsequently WBLS. Down the line, how do you place a value on that? What do you say? I mean, someone else could have come in and, let's say, done a programming format, but Frankie came in with his marketability already demonstrated and the ability to attract a following to FM, combined with a programming approach, as you said, pulling from here, pulling from there. Even the rap, if you go back to the rap, the one that I was mentioning earlier when he was on RL, that rap is a piece of Donnie Brooks, who was a jock called Soulfinger, who was on WDAS in Philadelphia, and who was kicking that kind of rap. Frankie pulls some of that rap from Donnie, but he had that ability to pull these things together, but then to package them in a way that made them bigger than they had been presented before.
Frankie Crocker, a true legend. You know, the life and times of a person like Frankie Crocker is hard to sum up in just 2 hours. We hope we've done an adequate job nonetheless. Our goal was simply to tell you the story of this larger-than-life man we heard on the radio each day over the past 3.5 decades and come to know and love as Frankie Crocker. Sure, he was complex, mercurial in many ways, egotistical and flamboyant, but that was Frankie Crocker. In many ways, that was why we loved him, because of his arrogance, his ego, his flamboyance, ultimately because of his complexities. He changed the way we felt about radio. He changed the way we listened to radio. Sure, there were the likes of Jocko Henderson and Hank Spann and Eddie O.J. and Roscoe and Gregory and other on-air DJs of the time who had just as great an impact on the business we call radio. But Frankie was unique, and he only passed this way once. And for that, we should be eternally grateful and blessed that we had the opportunity to hear him for as long as we did, and the good music he introduced to us. Thank you, Frankie, for the good times.
We are 7 acknowledged wonders of the world. You are about to be entertained by the 8th, the young man who has become a legend in his own time. It's the Frankie Crocker Show.
Do it, Frankie. Do it to it.
Suck it to me, mama. Good evening, New York. This is the show that's bound to put more dips in your hips, more cut in your strut, and more glide in your stride. If you don't dig it, you know you've got a hole in your soul. And you don't eat chicken on Sunday. Tall, tan, young, and fly. Anytime you want me, baby, reach out for me. I'm your guy. Just as good to you as it is for you. You get so much with the Frankie Crocker touch. After all, how could you lose with the stuff I use? Tall and tender for the feminine gender. Anytime you want me, you got it. Ow! You know, they call me wax paper because I rap on anything. Call me aluminum foil because my rap is so strong. And when it gets good to them, they call me candy paper because the rap is definitely sweet. Suck it to me, mama. But be cool, young girl. Don't let your eyes and your ears get your mind so messed up your heart desires something your body just can't stand. Hello, New York. That's just about it. As I put me into my straitjacket, talking to myself, but talking pretty. May each of you live as long as you want and never want as long as you live. May each of you live to be 100 and me 100 with minus a day. So I'll never know that nice people like you have passed away. And don't forget, whenever Frankie Crocker isn't on your radio just isn't really on. There's only one. Good night, God bless, and ciao.
There I go, there I go, there I go, there